So I think that regenerative is one of the most important trends that has happened over the last couple of years in the food space generally. It's something I'm very bullish on personally.
One, two, three.
Coming up on episode 400 of The Modern Acre, we're talking to serial entrepreneur Justin Maris, the founder of Kettle and Fire and TrueMed.
All right, Tim, big milestone. I've said it before. You're not podcasting if you're not celebrating every 100 episodes. Got to make a big deal about it. It's in our history. It's in our DNA, Tim. We're either doing a special interview or a rebrand. You got to take advantage of this milestone. Episode 400. Crazy.
Yeah, it's super fun to celebrate these milestones, Ty. I can't believe we started this podcast back in 2018. So we're over 7 years in now, which is crazy. I think it was before each of us had kids. It's a lot has changed since we started the pod.
A lot more gray hair, a lot more children. And it has been such a wild ride. I was doing some reflection today, Tim, on the past several years and would we do this again? And I think 100% I would do this again. I think this has been career changing, career defining for us doing the podcast. But I think, if someone asked me, hey, should I start a podcast? I think that everyone should be thinking about building their personal brand, doing content, because it just grows your surface area for luck, for serendipity, for opportunities. And I think everyone should do it, but it's really, really hard. I don't think we could have done it without each other. A framework I've heard from Sahil Bloom is this idea: anytime you're exploring a business venture or opportunity that you think is really awesome, you should just assume that it will take twice as long and achieve half the profits that you're projecting. And I think that's a great strategy. That's been the case with the podcast. It's been a grind. Don't start a podcast if you're trying to make a ton of money, at least in the short term. But it's been super rewarding, and I think we're just starting to see over the past year or two, Tim, the fruits of our labor over 7 years. But just putting our content out there, our voice out there has proved so valuable. And I would encourage anyone who's entrepreneurial, that has ambition, that it's so important to put your thoughts and content out there.
Good reflections, Ty. I mean, it is pretty crazy that the podcast has kind of led to me coming back to the family farm full time, you getting into agriculture full time. So I think it's been a huge benefit to our professional careers, and then the stuff we've built along the way, obviously with Polaris that we've chatted about and AgList most recently. So I'm really excited to see kind of this come together in the past couple of years, and it's been a slow build.
Tim, enough of this reflective, boring stuff. It's time to get to farmer mode. Okay, so the big news for this 400th milestone is we are officially, finally, much anticipated, dropping the farmer mode hats. So farmermode.com, we got that domain early on. The hats are ready for pre-order. So if you've been wanting one of these farmer mode hats, Tim has been teasing them on LinkedIn. His own hats. We got some early samples of the hats. They are of the highest quality, 5-panel, snapback, custom tagging. Go to farmermode.com, get yourself one of these hats. They will be shipping within the next 1 to 2 months. We're trying to hedge. It's a pre-order. We're working through was a custom order. So get it while supplies last. I don't know if these are going to last, Tim. I don't know if these are going to last.
I know. Hopefully we sell out and have to do a quick reorder to keep it going. But hopefully people are excited about farmer mode. Big FAQ that we often get asked, Ty, is, do I have to be a farmer to be in farmer mode? The answer is no. It's more of a mindset. If you're supportive of the agriculture industry, if you're hustling, entrepreneurial, you're in farmer mode. So when Ty and I, we always joke, we'll be doing 3 things at once, got a ton of meetings back to back. We're like, I'm just locked in farmer mode right now. I'm just getting it done.
Exactly. Farmer mode is founder mode, but for the ag industry. It's for the entrepreneurial, the hustlers that are just getting after it, that are resilient like farmers and persevere like farmers do. So anyone can honor farmers with a farmer wearing a farmer mode hat. So get yours today. And also, Tim and I have a exclusive community called the Modern Acre Co-op. And in the Modern Acre Co-op, Tim and I are doing weekly exclusive audio content where we give our pick of the week. We chat about what we're learning, what we're consuming, lessons we're taking away, learnings, and the news of the week. We're putting those out weekly. And then we also get the community together about every other month to talk about what other people are building, how they're thinking about agriculture, technology, sustainability. It's called the Modern Acre Co-op. And by being in the Modern Acre Co-op, you get additional benefits whenever we come out with merch. So if you've been thinking about joining the Modern Acre Co-op, now's your time, because if you sign up for an annual plan, you get the hat for free. Okay, this is the steal of the century. So if you want to join the Modern Acre Co-op, get the hat for free, sign up for the annual plan. The details are all in the show notes.
All right, Ty, we got a fun one for episode 400. We had Justin Maris, the founder of Kettle and Fire and TrueMed, bunch of really cool businesses in the food and ag and health space. Justin's been on a ton of podcasts. He's been on one of our faves, My First Million, Invest Like the Best. He's been on all the big ones, so it's cool to get him on our pod to talk about kind of his thoughts, but specifically on how this relates to agriculture. So it was good to dig into his background, his entrepreneurial journey, and then kind of his takes on what this means for sourcing directly from farmers, on how the current administration might be looking at food systems and supply chains.
This was loaded with insight. We'll jump in with what's top of mind for Justin, but first, a word from our sponsor. Hey guys, quick message from our sponsor, PF Partners. Growing your business in the agriculture space in 2025 is maybe harder than it's ever been. Investor funding has dried up, growers have tighter budgets than ever, and overall, it's just hard to go to market. PF Partners, a consulting firm with over a decade of experience scaling successful ad tech solutions globally, has just launched a new webinar on optimizing go-to-market strategies in the agribusiness space. It shows you what's changing in the market, exactly how to deal with it. Everything is backed by research, and it's about go-to-market plays in the ag sector that you can use tomorrow. So if you're ready to turn your go-to-market efforts into results, go to themodernacre.com/PFP or text modern to 55444 to download the webinar for free. That's themodernacre.com/PFP or text modern to 55444.
Recently, Kettle and Fire, we launched a bone broth with this company called Maui Nui. And Maui Nui is building this amazing, as far as I know, the only supply chain in the world where they're basically turning, like wild animals. I'll kind of rewind. I'll tell the whole story because those things are just so freaking cool. There's 60,000 plus deer that are destroying Maui's ecology. And it's a massive problem. Axis deer are an invasive species. And so Jake decided to start a company to hunt, harvest, and then turn, the hunted animals into a source of nutrition, for their community and for the country. And I just think that is like the coolest story. And I've been going more and more down this nutrient density rabbit hole and understanding what you are basically what you eats. And if you're looking at nutrient density of something like Maui Nui, which is hunting wild animals that have foraged, moved about, eaten like a species appropriate diet for their entire lives, the nutrient density of these deer is like orders of magnitude better than many of like the cattle and other sorts of supply chain sources that, the average American is eating. And so I just am like thinking so much about sort of ecology and how nutrient density goes hand in hand with, ancestrally appropriate and like raising animals or harvesting animals, hunting animals, the way that sort of nature intended. So that's something that's been on my mind quite a lot.
The Maui Nui Kettle and Fire collab, the collab we didn't know we needed. Epic. Need that. I love that company. And I think, it's definitely like one of one that I've heard of, right? That are doing that kind of directly integrated animal straight to the food product.
Yes.
is pretty incredible.
It's amazing.
Justin, let's take a step back. For our audience that don't know who you are, can you give us a background of who you are and what got you involved in the food space?
So I started a company called Kettle and Fire. We're now the largest bone broth brand in the country. Started that about 8.5 years ago. And the reason I started it is in 2015, I was doing CrossFit, was traveling a lot. I was bad at cooking, still am. And I was basically looking at talking to like friends in CrossFit who were saying, oh, you should try this bone broth thing. Like high in collagen, high in amino acids, great for recovery, great for skin health, great for gut health. And when I went to the store to actually buy some, no one was making a product that I thought was actually high quality. And so at that point, I started to think about, what would it look like to actually source and make a product like a bone broth that met my quality standards. And around that same time, my younger brother, who was skipping college, was looking at going into the entrepreneurship world, like, kind of doing what I had done. He was playing soccer and basically like tore everything that you can tear in your knee. And so he was looking at ways that he could help recover after surgery. And I recommended bone broth. He had never heard of it. I was in San Francisco, which is like fairly progressive place when it comes to food and food systems. And no one there was making a bone broth that I thought was legitimate or, super healthy. Nick, my brother, was in the like Northeast area where our family lives. And he was also looking for a product that was healthy and well sourced. And again, no one was making it. And so we decided to team up and start Kettle and Fire, thinking at first that it would just be like kind of a small family, business that like I would stay in SF, do my tech company thing. This would be like a great starter business where Nick could get his hands dirty and understand how to start a business. And it just like kind of took off on us. And so here we are 8+ years later.
Talk me through that process. Like you go in the grocery store of like, I want to buy this product, but I think there should be a better product, like without experience in kind of these supply chains of like sourcing this materials. Like where do you even get started with something like that?
Oh man, it was super hard. I mean, we had no idea what we were doing, right? And so what I did is I was pretty confident that people wanted this. I basically put up a landing page, bought some ads, drove people to the website, and had people purchase a product that didn't exist. And basically after they purchased, I would email them and I'd say, hey, we're still working on the product. Either I'll refund you in full today, or I'll just give you 50% off and like, send it to you when we eventually make it. And so I started having conversations with customers and just getting an understanding of the problem. Like, what do they care about? Like, what were the attributes, sourcing, cook times, all these things. So I learned a lot. And one of the key things that we honed in on is we found out that most consumers care about nutrient density. They care about collagen, amino acids, and sourcing. And if you look, like, before Kettle and Fire came on the scene, all of the other companies that were making a bone broth in the market at the time, they were all using exceptionally short cook times. You can think about it. It's like if you're a manufacturer, are you going to make more money if you can do 10 batches of something, like cooking something like 4 hours at a time, or if you do one batch, for 24 to 48 hours, which is the amount of time that we actually cook every batch of our bone broth. And so the entire market was basically moving towards these short cook times. And that had a trade-off when it came to like amino acids, collagen, protein, like all the nutrient dense reasons that I think it's important to incorporate bone broth into your diet. As soon as we were like, okay, we have something here, we tried to find a manufacturer, and continually we just ran up against these manufacturers being like, these long cook times are insane. This is going to be such an expensive product. You guys have never done anything in the space. You don't have any money. You have no name. Like, we want Campbell's Soup to work with us. We don't care about these like two guys, And so we actually found our co-packer after emailing like over 500 different potential manufacturers, calling them, trying to find people, 0 bites. We actually found our co-packer because Nick, my brother, who was then 19, he cold emailed Mark Cuban as like a 19-year-old and he was like, hey, I'm a young entrepreneur. We're trying to figure this out. We have this idea. I think it's going to work. And Mark Cuban very kindly, for God knows why, responded and was like, here's my food person, talk to her about what you're trying to do. And she introduced us to our co-packer that we still use today. So it's just like shot in the dark, just, trying things.
I think that's like, we kind of gloss over this, right? But you cold emailed or called 500 places.
Yeah.
Like I think people that think they want to be entrepreneurs would stop after 50 and be like, this is crazy. Like, and I think like to have the perseverance, people will look at Kettle and Fire and be like, oh man, they just rode a wave. It was like the right product, right time. Some of that is true, right? Yep. But like to have the perseverance to be like, we like this idea, we just have to find the right partner, and we're going to literally call 500 and struck out on all of them. And then, but that's, I think, an example of like, I've talked about this before. People have talked about this, right? Creating your own luck, right? Yes. It's like you struck out on all of those, but because you went through that process and because you were like, hey, you have to think creatively, you have to think differently now that you struck out. Like, let's shoot a shot with Mark Cuban.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, look, it was very hard. We had no idea what we were doing, like literally no idea what we were doing. And so, and we had no connections. We didn't know anyone in the space. I had no experience in the space. Like, it's much, much easier, I think, now for us to start another company similar to Kettle and Fire if we wanted to, just because we have experience in the space. But at the time, it was just like banging our heads against the wall, basically, for almost a year, basically.
Let's go there next. Like you said, you started it because you were like, hey, this could be like a nice side hustle, earn some revenue. It's a win-win side project. When did you know, like, oh snap, there's something here, and like this is going to be the full-time thing?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think probably, frankly, it was pretty quick. Like, we launched in August, and I think in the first 4 months of the business, we basically did around 300 grand or something like that. Like, I had kind of been thinking about this as a business that would do like 10 grand a month in revenue. Didn't know how much bigger it would get. And what we saw is we did around 300 grand in revenue. We also launched on Thrive Market, which was then like very early and growing. And when we launched on Thrive Market, they were doing this thing where like they had thousands, hundreds of different products where they would test them and they would say, hey, you get a free thing of X if you sign up for an annual Thrive membership. And these are well-known products like, Mark's Daily, like Mark's Primal Kitchen stuff, Element. Like, there are a bunch of things that they were testing. And out of everything that Thrive was testing, Kettle and Fire, as like a giveaway, the bone broth, was the number one, like, best converting thing from a gift standpoint. And so there were just some of these like little signs where, we saw fast revenue traction. We saw it was like selling well on Thrive. The Thrive marketplace was responding well to it. And at that time, we were selling for $16.99 a box, and today it's in Whole Foods at like $6 to $7.99. And so when you just see like that kind of pull from the market, especially when we knew we could make the product better, we knew that over time we could bring the price down. We knew that like we could launch other flavors. We hadn't started on marketing. We had a bad name then. Back then it was called Bone Broths Co. It was not even called Kettle and Fire. Horrible name, like unbelievably bad. And so there were just all these things where I was looking at the business and I was like, this is working. And there are like 100 ways that I am aware of today that we are like blowing it. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of a good sign when you can very clearly look at like, there's all these things we're doing badly, and yet the thing is still working.
Justin, you've been at this for over 8 years now. I'm sure you've learned a ton about sourcing, supply chain. Like, what have you changed your mind about, like, within the food system, just working with suppliers, ingredients, like you mentioned, trade-offs earlier of making the decision, like, we want the longer cook time for product integrity. Like, feel like with food and branding, like, trade-offs always occur of, like, how you source products impacts kind of how you position it, market it. So chat to us a little bit about that.
Sourcing's really hard. Like, the unfortunate reality, I think, if you're starting a food brand or a CPG brand, is that our food system is mostly toxic. And like, there are very few ranchers, growers, farmers, and the like, that I think do things the right way. And those that do are often not at a scale where like it's really feasible to work with them at kind of the scale that Kettle and Fire is operating today. And so something like when we started out, we had a hell of a time trying to find someone that was meeting our standards from from taste, nutrient density, animal welfare, ranching standards, 100% grass-fed, grass-finished, no glyphosate, all these sorts of things. That has gotten easier today as we've gotten bigger size and as frankly the market has moved more in this direction. Like, there's more consumer demand for this, but it's really, really hard. I mean, we launched the first regenerative bone broth in 2021. This was like before Regen was a big thing. And we're basically like talking to all these tiny suppliers that are doing things the right way, that are amazing. Like, they're amazing, amazing people. And I'm like so grateful for them. But when you're trying to launch a brand that has scale potential, in so many ways, like, it is so, so hard to keep an extraordinarily high bar from a sourcing standard. And it's so easy to just like buy meat or buy a product from some larger name producer that takes basically has something that I think has some quality trade-offs. But it means that you don't have to like go through this incredibly onerous process to like find, source, vet, and then try and scale the supply chain of a bunch of these like smaller suppliers that I think often are doing work that is much more aligned with our values. We've now we're in the fortunate position today of having some scale. And so we are like now putting in some real work trying to figure out how to source and how to like bring our suppliers along with us to help them scale their business. And like, we will basically make commitments to say, hey, if you like transition more of your supply chain or more of your ranch land, whatever, to regenerative agriculture, like we're there as a buyer as you go through that transition. And so that's like that's something that gets me very excited right now. It's just hard to know, just hard to know and hard to find a bunch of these right now, unfortunately.
Totally. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest opportunities I see in ag and food is connecting these dots, because it is incredibly challenging. Like I remember, when Tim and I got involved with the farm, it was very early on. How can we do some sort of direct sourcing deal, right? We're doing these regenerative practices. What opportunities are there? And we had the inverse issue where we would like talk to a baby food company and be like, hey, what's your volume for the year if we did like, a squash, for a puree for a baby food? And they'd be like, the whole volume for the year was like 1/10 of an acre for us, which is like our field sizes are 50 acres. And so it's like, okay, well, think about the amount of operational complexity to do some sort of partnership versus like the business financials to make it worthwhile. Right. So I think there's a ton of opportunity there. Our friends at Cole at Local Line is working on this. There's a few different people in the space, but I think it's a big opportunity, a hairy problem. Justin, I want to shift to like your thoughts on regenerative. You guys were very early to regenerative. It's now taken off both, I think, just at the farm level, farmers understanding the practices, principles, way they can do it, certifications. There's been a lot of evolution there, and at the grocery store, right, a lot more consumer awareness about regenerative. Like, talk us through where you think regenerative is at, and if you kind of still believe in kind of that long-term vision of regenerative and how that can affect the food system.
So I think that regenerative is one of the most important trends that has happened over the last couple of years in the food space generally. It's something I'm very bullish on personally. Where it's going, my hope is that more and more companies are starting to think about regenerative from the standpoint of this is like where the food system should go, and get behind the principles around that. I think that regenerative is sort of what I hope it becomes, I should say, is like a big tent where a lot of people are going, hey, we are down with this idea of cover crops, no chemically intensive agriculture, using animal husbandry, like, sort of like minimizing to no soil disturbance, like all these things. I think that lead to better products. They lead to better ecology. They lead to better like nutrient density and better, food and animal health. I think are just incredibly important. As far as where it goes over the coming years, my sincere hope, and I think the opportunity that the regen space has, is it is, as far as I know, the only thing that I think has the opportunity to bridge the gap between like people who are all focused on human health and things like nutrient density and whatnot. Regenerative is like the best thing that's out there, and people that are focused on ecology, farming, and like environmental health. Like regen is one of the only answers, in my view, that satisfies both of these things. Like, and that is why, that's a big reason why I am so bullish and so hopeful that there's a lot that we can do here, and that, just generally how, generally, I hope that this trend continues to take off. And it does seem like this is something that many, many individuals, influencers, and others are getting behind, which is great.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on the big tent approach, where there's been a few groups that, they want to define it quickly and get the certification and kind of build that out. And like, you would rather than have a subset of organic farmers that have this like super high echelon thing, like get a broader group of farmers that are making practice changes, learning these principles, and a bigger tent is going to be more impactful.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, I do think that sometimes some of the groups in the health space have a tendency to like, oh, Regen's not this, Regen, like kind of like, quibble over things. And I think that I'm probably guilty of it too. But I think that at the end of the day, like we just have to be aware that no one, like, I think that there's not an epidemic of farmers doing regen like 10% wrong. Like that is not like the problem that we have in the food system. The problem that we have in the food system is you have 80+% of farmland is managed using chemically intensive monoculture, like monocropping sort of approaches. And any dent that we can make in that metric, whether it's, regen with a slightly different twist than someone wants it to be, I think that is like the way that we need to move as an industry and as a country to really make a dent on this sort of nutrient density agriculture problem.
How do you think you can help like incentivize that change? Like you mentioned, like you're doing a lot of work with like your supply chain for Kettle and Fire. Like the past administration rolled out the partnerships for climate smart commodities that gave money to a lot of farmers to like test and basically de-risk implementing some of these principles. That's currently on pause. Like we were actually a beneficiary of that on our farm for a small grant and had been deploying that on our farm, and that money has frozen up. So there's some uncertainty there. So that was like one program that was really valuable for us to kind of like start making this practice changes going down this direction. So like what levers do you think there are to pull to kind of get farmers comfortable with trying new things and really de-risk it? Because a lot of farmers are on razor thin margins and it's really hard to kind of risk it all making a practice change if there's not any kind of safety net or support there.
Totally. I mean, I think that this is where there's a big opportunity for companies like Kettle and Fire and others to guarantee some amount of transition. Like, hey, if you all invest now in a transition, like we can help front some of that capital. We can guarantee you to be a buyer on the other side of that transition. We can guarantee to pay you more on the other side of that transition. Like, I think that all of these are big opportunities that companies like ours and other brands have. The other thing I think that's really interesting is you see some companies, like I know Mad Agriculture is doing this, that are doing sort of this like transitional finance kind of thing, where they're basically coming to ranchers and land managers and saying, hey, if you are considering an organic or regenerative transition, we are willing to like be the capital, give you the capital now, and you just pay us back in the future. Steward, it's like Go Steward, I think is their website, is also doing a similar thing like this, where they're basically saying, hey, yeah, this is something that we're going to support and give you early access to capital if you want access to it. And so I think that is like, there's sorts of these different approaches that I think are very, very valuable.
Justin, I want to switch gears here. Been following your story and your journey, and you just feel like you seem like a psychopath entrepreneur, where you're just always got projects, and from a young age doing multiple side hustles. And Tim and I always have like 4 side hustles going at once. I want to talk about just kind of your approach to entrepreneurship and business. And I think recently you kind of stepped away from the CEO role at Kettle and Fire, launched TrueMed. I know you've got your arms in a number of different things. Like, talk us through your philosophy. Is it something strategic, or is it just, you're just a scatterbrain? Like, walk us through that, and then maybe you can speak a little bit about your latest stuff going on at TrueMed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both for sure. I think that generally my approach has been, I'll say this, early in my career, when I was starting Kettle and Fire, I was basically like oriented towards, how do I do something that makes money? Like I was very interested in entrepreneurship generally. I was recently out of college. I was kind of pretty convinced at that point that the normal corporate path was not necessarily one for me. And my orientation was very much towards, how do I just start a side business that covers my basic expenses? And then I have like an indefinite period of time to just try different ideas. And so that was kind of my orientation. And I was looking at the same time, the same year I ended up launching Kettle and Fire, I was also looking at a real estate play. I was looking at like a software thing. I was looking at like a cloud services, developer tools thing. And the idea that ended up working, Kettle and Fire, was an idea that just happened to be in a space that I really cared about. I don't think that's an accident. I basically think that, you tend to, if you're looking for opportunities, probably have the best spaces, the best ideas in the space that you are most naturally drawn towards, because you're naturally like getting pulled towards the edges. Like I was getting pulled into communities where paleo, CrossFit in San Francisco, people talking about gut health in like 2014, 2015. that was not normal. My mom didn't know what gut health was. She didn't know what collagen or gelatin was. Vital proteins was like 2 years old and no one knew what they were. I mean, this was very, very early. And so it wasn't really a surprise to me looking back that my first like thing that really worked was in a space that I cared about. So I wanted to start a company, anything that would like do decently well or had a shot at doing decently well. That ended up growing. And like, as I got more and more into running Kettle and Fire, as I talked to more customers, as I talked to our retail partners, as I talked to everyone, I got a more holistic understanding of the space and an understanding of like all of the issues that exist in our existing food system. And once I saw that, I think that really opened my eyes to like what I still think is the biggest problem in the world, which is the US chronic disease crisis. And the fact that our food system is basically poison. Like I call it like the great American poisoning. And it was just this obsession and this secret that I felt like I discovered, which is we are in the throes of the worst health and worst chronic disease crisis that any group of humans have ever before experienced in the world. Like literally, this is the worst it's ever been. And the reason for this, like you go on the news, you go on anything like this. Now people are starting to talk about chronic disease. No one was in 2015. And around that time, people would tell you, oh, it's like people are fat and lazy. People are, eating too much soda or whatever. And no one was digging into what I thought the root issue was, which is the incentives in our food system are broken. And everything around our food system has like toxin exposure, is not raised or grown or whatever for nutrient density, is not local. It's like there are just so many broken issues in the food system. And so that's kind of where, I just got obsessed with this problem. And since then have every couple of years seemingly had like a new idea for some way I think that we can try and address and improve the biggest problem in the country, and I just get excited by doing those kinds of things.
Justin, how's it been working with your brother? It's really cool. You're doing projects together, like Ty and obviously work together on a number of different things. Just talk to us about like how that experience goes, what the relationship looks like.
It's been great. I mean, I think that in so many ways we've become way closer as a part of it. To a large degree, starting a business or doing something together, it's sort of just like an excuse to hang out more. Like some of my very good friends have come from starting a company together or working together just because, in many ways, I think like business is fun. Doing something you care about is fun, and getting a lot of reps and time with someone that you think is awesome on a problem you care about is like an amazing gift. And so we had a great time working together, and then, could call in mom if we ever had to referee a tough decision or something like that. But it was amazing. Like it was and is amazing. I'm involved now in Light Labs, his new company. And, he's been super helpful with a bunch of stuff that I'm doing as well. And so it's like a really great relationship, I would say.
All right, Justin, I want to talk about the grocery and the opportunities in grocery and food retail. You had mentioned on a podcast recently, and my ears perked up, this idea of Blue Bottle for butchery and for meat, right? This idea that Blue Bottle innovated in a space and built a brand around specialty coffee, and you think it's potential to go there. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm super bullish on this idea. I think that if you look at coffee, I think there's a lot of analogs between coffee and meat, like where coffee was in the call it like 70s, 80s, and where meat is today. Like at some point, there was people's coffee experience was burnt to shit Folgers that was like not well sourced, not roasted. There wasn't like an art and craft behind it, a story behind the sourcing. And that was basically what you could get at the grocery store, what you could get at coffee shops. And there were very, very, very few cities where you could source like incredibly high quality coffee. And then Starbucks came along, sort of scaled this like craft coffee experience. Then beyond that comes like Blue Bottle, Ritual Coffee Roaster, Stumptown, like all these different roasters that are amazing on sourcing and have gone super, super deep on the craft and art of roasting and coffee. I think that there's a similar opportunity and a similar thing is going to happen in meat. Like if you look at, meat today, you walk down the grocery store and what you are getting is like the Folgers equivalent. It's like a red thing of beef on a styrofoam thing with plastic wrap over top of it no story. It's often grain fed. You don't know how that animal was raised, where it's from, the genetics, how long that animal lived. All of these things have huge implications for, the taste, the form factor, everything like that. And I think that there's an incredible amount of like interest in the story behind meat and the proteins that we're eating today. And that's shown by companies like ButcherBox doing over $500 million in revenue. Companies like Snake River Farms, I think, are doing like 200 to 300 million in revenue. And that's American Wagyu. And I think that we are like on the cusp of more people understanding that the genetics you use, how you raise an animal, what they're fed, and different cuts, how long they live, all these things create a really rich story and quite a different experience when it comes to buying and eating meat. And I think that there's just a huge opportunity for someone to start a modern butcher shop that unlocks a lot of this, that unlocks and taps into like this massive opportunity.
I love this idea so much. I've been doing a half cow with my parents the past couple seasons.
Exactly, yeah.
There's a like family that we know that lives out in the country where they raise a couple of cattle of their own, and it goes to like a third party butcher. And I have a freezer in my garage loaded up, and it's like pretty cool that it like feeds me for majority of the year, and it's all comes from one animal. It just feels like much more like respectful, and you just like appreciate where your food comes from versus going to the grocery store and having to like read through food labeling of like, where's this cow actually coming from? How is it raised? And now that I've already worked through my half cow that I split with my parents, I found another local farm that I drive to on the way to and from the farm, and they have a little shack. It's next to a plant nursery, and they sell beef out of this little shack. And it's like, if you turn this into like a cool vibe, like a Blue Bottle, like you could have something really, really popular.
Totally. I completely agree. I mean, I think there's so much interest in this topic and sourcing, feed, all these things that you could tell a really compelling story, in my view, to the average consumer that has not yet thought very deeply about their meat consumption and the story behind it. But I think that is very interested in doing so. And so I think that that's like a massive opportunity generally.
And what do you think about like where Whole Foods has gone, right? Like I think Whole Foods was kind of like this beacon for local sourcing and clean sourcing and responsible sourcing, and has become somewhat diluted. Like, do you think I think the challenge of these types of businesses are they're CapEx intensive. They're not the most capitally efficient businesses. Like, does someone need to scale with this idea to be successful? Like, walk us through that.
I don't think that someone needs to scale with the idea to be successful. Like, I think so many times this stuff, it comes down to like what you want out of the thing. And I think that like there are probably some people that are in the farming community that if they could open the best butcher shop in their city or town or whatever, it would be an incredibly rewarding job, much more so than like being a sales executive at like your local tech company or being an accountant or something. And so I do think though, if you had ambitions to scale, I mean, the meat market in general is a massive, massive commodity. It's like it's a massive market, maybe like over $1 trillion a year. That seems like a lot, but globally that might be true. But like the meat protein space is just absolutely enormous. And almost all meats today are commodity, which means that if you came in and you built a brand and a story and an experience that like people loved and cared about, and had the sourcing partnerships to back that up, I think that there's a massive opportunity to like create and carve out this like hyper premium or somewhat premium space within the meat space while also bringing butchery back to America. And I think that someone that wanted to be like the Howard Schultz, like the Starbucks founder of meat, that opportunity absolutely exists.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the hot ticket for whoever builds this. Like when I talk to friends, families, like our neighbors, like, oh, you get a half cow. Like, how do you do that? Like, what's the process? Like, everybody's like super into it. So I think this would be a good one. Any other ideas you have in food and ag, Justin? Like, what are you thinking about? Like, what would be a cool area to focus on, kind of the supply side?
Yeah, I think that a couple of other ideas I have are, I think that we are probably, this is not a specific idea, but more of a general one. I think that we are on the cusp of a lot of people starting to wake up when it comes to understanding some of the downsides and ways that pharmaceutical interventions are maybe like not as universally helpful as maybe your average MD today believes. And so I think that we are really on the cusp of more and more people starting to be skeptical of pharmaceutical interventions and look for true food as medicine or supplements as medicine approaches. Like if you look at at data, thyroid dysfunction is something that goes hugely underdiagnosed. It's afflicting a massive chunk of the population, and our pharmaceutical interventions for that are not really like good at solving the root cause issue of thyroid dysfunction. What is like changing or tailoring your diet, implementing a couple supplements, and changing some things about your lifestyle. And I think that more and more people are waking up to these ideas, especially as things like function health and superpower kind of come on the scene. People are getting insight into what's going on in their bodies for basically the first time ever. And so I think that insight and that ability to understand, okay, like my LDL is high, maybe I should consider, I can maybe go on a statin, or I could potentially do something like supplement with Toku Health or like, nattokinase or one of these kinds of things. And so that's sort of a big shift that I think is going to start happening in a big way.
Justin, as we kind of wrap things up here, I love kind of your approach to health wellness. You have to take a little bit of an 80-20 mentality, right? Because I think a lot of people it's overwhelming, right? Of how to focus on nutrition and fitness and health. What would be kind of for the average listener, like would be some of like, hey, I'm just looking for a way to start. I want to eat a little cleaner. I want to live a little healthier. What would be kind of your quick and dirty rundown?
Yeah, I really do think that the 80-20 stuff helps a lot here. Like, I also think that people generally spend all their time focused on macros. This is true of keto. People are now focused on like getting enough protein, all these things. Great. Maybe, we can argue that. I think that people way under focus on nutrient density and sourcing. Like if you're getting a bunch of shitty protein from the cheapest whey protein that you can find on Amazon that's manufactured in China, sure, you may be eating a high protein diet, but likely the toxin load and like the bioavailability and a bunch of the other stuff that comes with that product has some other health trade-offs. I think that more and more people should be way more focused on two things: nutrient density, buying and eating the most nutrient dense foods that you possibly can. This includes things like bone broth, organ meat, well-sourced proteins, organic, local, vegetables and fruits. And then secondly, I think the other thing is toxin avoidance. Like I think that we are basically moving around in a stew of, pesticides, herbicides, microplastics, PFAS, BPAs, bisphenol, just all of these things that we know are harming human health. And so I think that for someone that wants to move towards optimal health, yes, like diet, exercise, sleep well, get sun, really important. Definitely do it. I think that the two things that people are probably underinvesting in today, for the most part, are these like nutrient density and toxin avoidance sort of buckets.
Justin, this has been an awesome conversation. Thanks for coming on the pod. As we wrap up, how can our listeners get in touch and connect with everything you're working on?
Yeah, so I have I'm on Twitter at JWMares, MARES. I also have a monthly longer form Substack that I send out, once a month that I just kind of write for fun. It's justinmares.substack.com.
So Ty, what do you think?
Episode 400, awesome guest, launch of Farmer Mode hats. Oh man, I'm glad we have 400 here and behind us now. We've been like building to this day, launched AgList a few months ago. So I'm happy, and we're going to keep it rolling. We're going to be in farmer mode indefinitely, always on farmer mode, except on the weekends when we're with family.
Totally. I'm already thinking about episode 500, Ty. Got a ways to go, but excited for that one.
Thanks for listening, guys. Farmermode.com. Get one of the hats. Great way to support us. Thanks for listening.